The Intertwinement of Intimate Partner Violence and Substance Misuse Among Women by Kelsey Pearson. During this presentation, we will explore the complex and messy ways intimate partner violence and substance misuse intertwines for women. We will also explore how this impacts treatment outcomes, the need for additional services, and also discuss the steps we must take both as counselors and as a society to address this highly prevalent co-occurrence. Intimate partner violence, or IPV, can be defined as physical, sexual, and psychological aggression by a current or former intimate partner. Substance misuse can be defined simply as the harmful use of or dependence on drugs, also called addiction. You may be more familiar with the term substance abuse, but since I strongly believe existing stigmas are a massive barrier to addiction treatment, I try to always avoid using such stigmatizing language. This presentation will focus on women as they are much more likely to be the victims of IPV. Women exposed to IPV are 2 to 7 times more likely to experience addiction than the general population. Annually, 7.4 million women report experience of IPV, although we can be certain that many cases go unreported. Of these women, 5% suffer serious injuries, to include being beaten, choked, and even assaulted with a weapon. The rates of PTSD among IP survivors are as high as 64%, whereas the numbers are about 1 to 12% for the general population. Also, the odds of completing addiction treatment drops by 30% for victims of IPV. Since 2014, I have seen firsthand the impact of IPV and addiction from observing the experiences of my younger sister. Her addiction began years prior to 2014, but when she wound up in a relationship with an abusive partner, everything changed drastically for the worse, and she became much more dependent on drugs. I really appreciate the opportunity to explore this topic, as it has helped me reconcile my sister's experiences and learn additional information that may prove to be helpful in assisting my sister in her recovery, should that opportunity ever present itself. By learning more about the complex relationship between IPV and substance misuse, counselors can do a better job helping their clients and ensuring their safety. Considering the current opioid epidemic, many would agree that more attention needs to be paid to addiction and its complexities. Assuming an increase in treatment effectiveness, society could reap the benefits of both reduced costs and reduced crime. The reason this should be most important to society? Drug users are people too, and sometimes I feel like we lose sight of that. I will now present the findings from my research. The existence of a bidirectional relationship between IPV and substance misuse creates a vicious cycle. The use of drugs increases a woman's risk for IPV for reasons such as impaired judgment, failing to recognize and act on warning signs, and inability to fight off unwanted advances. The experience of IPV then increases the chance that a woman will use substances to avoid the consequential negative emotions that result, something referred to as avoidance coping. When using substances to cope, women are then at an increased risk for re-victimization, and the cycle continues. In addition to a bidirectional relationship between IPV and substance misuse, evidence also suggests a curvilinear relationship. When victims show high and low levels of avoidance coping, they often use more drugs to numb their pain. But when these victims show moderate levels of avoidance coping, it actually works to their advantage by acting as an adaptive coping strategy, which helps the victim survive the impacts of the IPV. As we can see, the avoidance coping strategy of choice among victims is largely substance misuse, which helps decrease arousal and anxiety from the IPV. Childhood abuse has been shown as a shared experience among many women presenting this co-occurrence of IPV and addiction. These women often have more mental health problems than drug users who have not experienced IPV. Also, while not reported by all women in the particular study at hand, most women reported pasts with lots of sexual violence as well as IPV that began as early as adolescence and also early adulthood. Due to the intersection of drug use with IPV, Many victims also have pasts of violence stemming from trading sex for drugs to maintain their addictions. When looking at IPV and addiction, partner power is very common and largely the most interesting theme to me, having observed my sister's experiences. Many times, the partner in power is the one who introduces drugs to the victim and therefore is often the supplier also who is necessary to maintain their addiction, making drugs a source of power and control over the victim. Often, partners of power threaten and coerce the victim and even isolate the victim from pre-existing support systems. Partner powers often force victims into the sex trade to score drugs and then punish them afterwards for their behavior. Partner powers often try to prevent victims seeking recovery treatment, and they often sabotage any efforts made, which naturally makes it unlikely that the victim will successfully complete drug treatment. By now, it should be easy to see how IPV greatly impacts a woman's chance of recovery from drug addiction. The intersection of IPV with addiction reduces the victim's chance of completing treatment by 30%, as we discussed earlier. Victims remain abstinent for fewer days, and they are 4.5 times as likely to use promptly at discharge from substance use treatment. Due to the complexities of the relationship between IPV and substance misuse, it is so very important that we integrate the services necessary for victims to achieve successful recovery, as such integration is shown to increase effectiveness of outcomes. In addition, providers must attend to the traumas present for this population, and sadly, only 21% of U.S. treatments offer such trauma-based interventions. It is also important that longer and more intense courses of treatment are offered for victims so that they can be treated from a holistic perspective to enhance treatment outcomes. With the nature of IPV, it is important that such services be offered in gender-specific settings and based on research should also offer additional services of value for the holistic recovery of those suffering. Examples of such services could include social services and employment training, services aimed at increasing overall life skills. Counselors play a big role in assisting clients affected by the complexities of IPV and addiction. For starters, there's a huge lack of research, and much existing research appears to focus only on the perpetrators of IPV rather than the victims and their treatment outcomes. It is also important that counselors act proactively to enhance collaborations with other service providers to ensure the necessary integrations. Currently, for example, most addiction treatment providers only focus on addiction, and most domestic violence service providers only focus on violence. Treatment outcomes are often higher when these services are combined and also include a trauma-informed approach that helps treat the root of the presenting issues. Counselors can also be impactful by offering clients education such as what defines healthy and unhealthy relationships. It's often that victims lose sight of their own current situations, and education can be of value. It is also very important for counselors to properly screen clients for the co-occurrences of IPV and substance misuse. This is especially important from a prevention standpoint, especially when working with high-risk young females. It is vital that counselors receive proper training on the co-occurrence so that they are better able to assist their clients in need. Counselors can also work with clients in the development of safety plans, since many clients experiencing IPV are at a great risk for harm. Counselors should also be mindful of the impact of longstanding histories of substance misuse and the impacts that this has on their clients presenting issues. This will enable counselors to ensure that they provide services that are most effective. When speaking to the impact counselors can have on their clients, it's important to offer a risk profile. Women who are at an increased risk for the effects of IPV and addiction include those with a history of childhood trauma as well as a history of IPV. Additionally, individuals who use IV drugs, as well as individuals who use many drugs at once, as well as individuals who use drugs at a high frequency, are at greater risk for this co-occurrence. In summary, it is clear that the relationship of IPV and substance misuse is a very complex relationship. There's a great need for more research to learn more about this relationship, as well as to devise more effective treatments. It is also very important that members of the mental health community at large are properly educated on this relationship so that they can better recognize and understand how to adequately treat affected clients.